Hey everyone, this week for Tuesdays with Miss Tampa, I am speaking with Allie. She was Miss Rhode Island in 2015, and she is such an inspiration and an incredible boss lady. So I'm excited for you all to get to know her a little bit better. Thank you for being here, Allie.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Yes, yes. So to start, can you share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're doing these days?
So, of course, I was Miss Rhode Island 2015. I'm from Rhode Island. I've been all over the state, which is not saying much because we're very tiny. But I identify as a Rhode Islander because it's where I've spent the most time, even though I've lived in 7 different states. I've been all over the country. I'm currently in Oklahoma right now and have been for the past couple of months because of my Army training. And after I finished my time as Miss Rhode Island, I went on to finish grad school not once but twice. And then I enlisted in the Rhode Island National Guard and earned my commission as an officer this past year, which is why I'm in Oklahoma now. So it's been quite a journey.
I'm sure. You have such an incredible bio. But as Miss Rhode Island 2015, can you share a little bit about your journey to Miss America? Was it something you always dreamed of, and what led you to that moment?
It was, I will preface it with this. It was something I always dreamed of, but it was not something I always thought was attainable for me. I started doing pageants when I was 14, so 14 years ago. And I remember looking up to the Miss America contestants and watching Miss America every year. I had been competing with the National American Miss Organization and in other pageants. And I remember watching Miss America and thinking, I'm not talented enough, I'm not fit enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough.
Mhm.
And I told myself this for so long. And I had been growing up in California, and I always said I wouldn't touch a local pageant with a 10-foot pole because I would lose so terribly and miserably. And I was so wrong. And even if I wasn't wrong, even if I never won anything, the thought process that takes you out of pursuing something that's in your heart, or the negative self-talk that we often engage in, and having imposter syndrome and this, that, and the other, whatever it is that we convince ourselves why we don't deserve something, it's so wrong. And I'm so glad I was able to counteract that and finally put myself in there. So if you're experiencing that ever, think of me in this story. But I entered my first local pageant because at this point I had aged out of National American Miss. I loved my time with them, and I was looking for something else to do. I was a college student. I was a theater kid throughout high school, and I wanted to perform again. So I entered a local pageant, the Miss Finger Lakes Miss Upstate New York pageant. And again, I'm showing up as exhibition. I'm just here to explore and
Uh,
dip my foot into the Miss America organization. And I entered it, and 6 days before the pageant, I entered it several months before the pageant, but 6 days before, I call my mom from my apartment at Syracuse University, and I go, I don't have a talent.
oh my
And she's
goodness.
like, how did you even get into this pageant if you don't have a talent? Like, what did you tell them you were going to do? And I had said, I'm going to do a monologue, and I didn't have a monologue. And lo and behold, my mom suggested I do a song from The Little Mermaid that I performed in high school. And I told her to send over my senior ball gown from high school
My
that I hadn't worn in years, squeezed my way into this thing, threw on a swimsuit I had from when I was a teenager, and I ended up winning this pageant. And again, had I not ever won, that's fine too, because the win for me was showing up and competing. And that was kind of my mentality throughout Miss America. Sometimes your win is just that you're there. It's just that you're showing up. It's that you have the opportunity to push yourself beyond what you thought was something that was ever capable, that you're ever capable of doing. And that's one of the reasons why I love pageants and why I've stuck around with pageants. It's like having that self-fulfillment of seeing yourself do things you never thought you would do before. And I think that's a huge reason why I'm on the career path I'm on today.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. And that is incredible advice for anyone pursuing a dream, just to go for it. Because I think most of the times we are our worst critics and we hold ourselves back
Yeah.
most of the time. So it's important to go outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And were there any highlights of your years Miss Rhode Island or going to Miss America that you remember?
So Miss America is interesting, and especially the way it was done back in my day, because things are a little bit different now, but you essentially would have like 2 or 3 months after winning your state pageant and go to Miss America. Those 2 to 3 months, yes, they're filled with advocacy and appearances and media and all of the things that a Miss State should do, but you're also preparing for the national competition. And there was so much enthusiasm and excitement around my community, especially in a state like Rhode Island, where it's such a tight-knit community. And then I went to Miss America and didn't place, and it was like this huge roller coaster that just dropped me off. And I remember coming home and thinking, well, now what? And there was this kind of weird period where I wasn't really sure what was next, and I realized I needed to make the most of the bulk of the year, because Miss America is just a blip on the radar. It's 2 weeks out of a whole year that you really have to make an impact. So I got involved with an organization that I care about deeply, that I've been involved with for many years, Running Start, which trains women for political leadership. And I got involved with a program they were doing called I Look Like a Politician, that was changing the perspectives of what it means to look like a politician and really reclaiming the space for women, and so many different people from different walks of life that haven't historically been represented at the decision-making tables of our legislature. So I was involved in that. That was a huge highlight. And being able to work with organizations like the Girl Scouts, or going to Washington, D.C. to speak on behalf of my platform and getting more women involved in leadership. These are things that I never even imagined. And I've been so laser focused on Miss America, and then taking a step back and being able to realize, this is something that I care about, and it's beyond Miss Rhode Island. It just became second nature. And so much of that has continued on past my time as Miss Rhode Island.
That is incredible. And like so many other people have said, it is so much more than just a crown or a sash. It's what you're able to do and the impact that lasts a lifetime. So one of the ways that I did connect with you was through your platform, which is similar to mine, about empowering women to pursue leadership roles. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the obstacles you find women have when pursuing leadership roles, and how can we overcome those or address them?
So I touched on this a little bit about me convincing myself for years that I was never going to be good enough for Miss America. While I was going through that whole manifestation of those thoughts in my mind, I was working on a term paper about why so few women not even are elected to office, but don't run in the first place, because the numbers show that women win at the same rates as men when they run. So the big puzzle is, why are women not running to begin with? And what I found is that a lot of women talk themselves out of these positions, and we think, oh wow, we need to have 3 degrees and solve some major world issue and cure some major disease before we put our name on the ballot, whereas our male counterparts wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, maybe I'll run for office today. So there's a lot of socialization that has gone into that. There is a lot of negative self-talk and imposter syndrome that has gone into that. And one of the ways we combat this is just setting that aside, realizing that we are worth it. We don't need every accolade in the book to be worthwhile as a candidate on the ballot. We need to have a voice, and we need to be able to express that, and our views and perspectives matter, and they're needed at the table. And that realization in itself, I think, is a huge awakening to many women, and many people, especially now as we see people who are more politically active than ever, especially in our generation. We realize that we have been left out of the equation for so long, and it's on us to change that.
Such great advice, and so important to change that narrative. And I think one of the biggest things is simply encouraging more women to run, or encouraging someone that you admire to run, because I know it's been proven that women have to be asked maybe 6 or 7 times before even running. So it's crazy.
I always put that in people's minds. Someone does something significant in the community. Have you ever thought about running for office? Or someone shows some great feat of leadership. Have you ever thought about running for office? I think it's a conversation that needs to be had more, especially in that same breath of I look like a politician, and changing what it means to be a politician. So often we think of like the career politician, the wealthy man in a suit who has all of the degrees, maybe went to law school, has the political science background, worked for this politician and the other. But we don't think about how there are so many other people in our community and so many other voices that matter. And one of the biggest things recently, and I will tell this to all of my friends in the medical field, we need you guys to run for office. We've had a global pandemic that I think could greatly have been treated by having more people who are science-based and have been in the medical field being at the decision-making helm in every level of government. So encourage those people that maybe don't have the traditional background, and of course not just women, but like anyone who has a great story and who has a great perspective, who's been left out of some facet of public policy. We need you.
I love that. And while we're talking about the virus, obviously there has been a pandemic, and now on top of that, a lot of people are hurting right now. Our nation is going through some really tough times. What is your message for America? What do we need to do to come together?
The message for America is that Black Lives Matter. And that's something that we all need to rally around. I know that it has been something that has been seen as divisive. I know it's something that has been seen as controversial. And at the end of the day, it is neither of those two things. Black Lives Matter. We have to stand up for people of color who have been discriminated against, who have experienced disproportionate amounts of violence, who have been discriminated against at every turn in their lives. And it's not up to us to say, okay, well, no, all lives matter. We know that. We know that.
Right.
We need to look at people who have been victims of systems and dismantling systems that have been oppressive. And that's the best thing we can do to really come together, because I think there is no coming together under the current state. We have to make systemic change. And by realizing that, by setting maybe some of our pride or our own upbringings aside and looking at the world from somebody else's perspective, that's how we get better and come together and move forward.
Mm-hmm. So important. And the Miss America organization is embarking upon its 100th year coming up. You compete at Miss America. Do you think Miss America is still relevant today? And if so, why do people need to continue supporting Miss America?
Miss America has had a very interesting history over 100 years, and the organization is very different, as we know today, than it was 5 years ago, 20 years ago, from the inception. And it absolutely is still relevant, but the only way it maintains its relevancy is if it grows with the times. So I say Miss America is still relevant if it is giving people a platform, it is giving young women a platform to speak their minds, to incite change in their communities, and to further their education. And we're past the times where, you know, the contestants needed to submit their measurements and their weight and would stand on stage for crowning in swimsuits. We've moved away from so many of the things as we've grown as a society, and continuing to provide scholarships. That's important, but I think even more so than ever. And yes, I know I have this bias because this is my platform. This is near and dear to my heart. And I've always seen the Miss America organization as a premier women's leadership organization. But I think Miss Americas have the right to be political, and they need to get into the thick of issues. And yes, being a pageant title holder, you learn diplomacy and tact and how to navigate really difficult situations and controversial issues, but you need to be speaking on behalf of these things if we're going to be relevant. I would definitely say we are seeing the tides turn in a lot of different capacities, and for so much of what I have spoke about on my platform, the time is really now, where we're seeing women especially, and young women, come to the table and demand space, create space for themselves. And that's what Miss America is all about. And if the organization is going to be, continuing on past 100 years, we're going to have to keep moving forward with that.
I love that. I love that advice. It's so important to be, have your opinion and be able to say it in an eloquent and non-offensive way, but still be able to have that opinion and not be afraid to say it. So last, I want to ask you, how can people stay updated with you, and where can they follow you?
Anyone can follow me at alliecurtis.com. You can contact me there. And I also have all of my social media at Allie Curtis RI. I am a retired pageant queen now, which is fun and an interesting perspective. But there's always still plenty of pageant content and plenty of political content, because that's really where I've kind of found my niche and am moving into it as I look forward to things that could be happening in the future.
Yes, I've loved following you and keeping up with the incredible things you are doing. I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your military training. And like I said, you are one of the biggest boss ladies, and I'm so happy to have spoken with you today and know my followers will gain so much advice from you.
Back at you. So
Oh,
excited for you.
thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.